Good afternoon. Hello, Maria Elena
Hello.
and Sergio.
Yes, hello.
Welcome. Uh, Maria Elena, where are you calling from? I can't hear you at the moment.
Hi, I'm not sure this is my session. Um, so I am presenting at 7:30,
Oh, right.
but so I have to find out my session.
I think you're not presenting here, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So
Good luck.
bye.
Bye now.
I
Sergio,
don't know how to exit. This is just
the red, do you see the red button at the top of your screen? Click on that. Sergio, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, you are. Yes.
How are you?
No, I'm fine, thank you. A bit sleepy. It's 5:30 in Mexico. 5:30 in the morning in Mexico. So yeah, I'm a bit sleepy, so I'm drinking my coffee right now.
Quite right. And Game of Thrones cut too. It should set
Mm.
you up.
Yeah, all
Thanks.
right.
I'm sorry that we have not got other participants, other speakers rather. But we'll just wait a few minutes to see who comes along. In whatever happens, we'll record this and we will
All right.
we'll go ahead and however many are here, we'll have a good conversation and then just take it from there.
That's
Um,
fine.
so whereabouts? Remind me where you work?
I'm working for an independent evaluation office at the subnational level. It's called Evaluation Institute of Public Policy
Right. Yeah.
in northern Mexico. It's I'm going to explain a little bit in my presentation where it's where it's located.
Good. Good. We look forward to that. And yeah, we've had some almost Mexican standard hot weather earlier this week, but now we've
Hmm.
more traditionally English.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, I can tell that. Yeah, so enjoy while it lasts.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's great you could join us. There's a conference in Copenhagen next year. Would you be able to get over for that, do you think?
Yeah, I would have liked to go. I had experience before because back in 2019, I was in the Ideas conference, the
Oh yeah.
global conference in Prague.
Yeah.
So well, I understood the dynamics and obviously the networking. So I was keen to participate in this conference as well. So
Right.
well, but the pandemic struck, and here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, so do keep in touch for about that for next year as well.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, but that would be great. Yeah.
And are you planning to stay for the later sessions with
Mm, yeah. I think it's
Michael
specifically.
Quinn? I think I'll be listening to Michael Quinn Patton. I think that'll be interesting.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
then there's the two keynote speakers at the end as well,
Hmm.
which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. Every time he shows, he has something else to say, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, he's very good, good value. And yeah, I did some presentation, or we were both presenting work at the same event for the World Bank a few years ago. So
All
it was
right.
good to get a chance to meet him. I'm just going to
Hmm.
say hello to our volunteer here. Hi, volunteer.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. What's your name?
My name is Christy.
Hi, Christy. Hi. Um,
Good.
so I don't know if you're aware, with the two other speakers we've not been able to make the conference for reasons that we none of us understand.
Okay.
But so it will be just Sergio's presentation, and I've got no idea if other people will join us as well. But we will certainly go ahead with the presentation, even if it's just the three of us.
It's fine, no worries.
So do feel free to chip in. And where are you participating from?
I am from Kenya.
Ah, Nairobi or?
Yes, Nairobi.
Well, I hope, yeah. Do feel free to join in as well. Let's give it another minute and then we will get underway. Are you happy to share your screen with us, Saki? Or have you got a presentation?
Yeah, I've got a presentation, so I will share it.
That's great. Fantastic. You're on your coffee, I'm on ginger beer, so I'm a bit later in the day.
No, that's awesome. Ginger, right?
Mm.
I miss cider.
Ah, yes, yeah, that's a good English term. Yes, yeah. And Marion, you're very welcome. Is it Marion or Sandra who's just joined us? I seem to be very blurred. Am I very blurred on your screen, by the way?
You look fine to me, I guess.
Oh, that's good. I'm feeling, just looking a bit blurred. Marion, hi. Do you want to just say hello? I know you.
Hello, how are you?
Very well. All the better for hearing you. I was just
Thank you.
we should have two other speakers, but sadly they've not been able to make it. But we are going to go ahead with this presentation, and so we will have a discussion on that. And then, however long it takes, that's great. We've got until 2, but we don't need to use all of that time if we don't need to. So, Sergio, I suggest that we get underway, and I'm really looking forward to this.
Very good.
So let's, yeah, and
Very
take us
good.
for, 20 minutes or whatever.
That's right. So I guess you can see my presentation. Yes, that's right. So, all right. So here we are. All right. So what I'm here to share with you today is the experience of a model of an independent evaluation office at the subnational level in Mexico. This is quite important for us, at least in the Mexican context, because in the global south, I think we are at a pivotal point for evaluation in which populist regimes have turned against evidence on what works in public policy, right? So the public policy process in the global south, and particularly in Latin America, appeared and evolved to support state reform mechanisms. So back in some decades ago and a few years ago, actually, authoritarianism was the norm, along with limited transparency and weak bureaucratic accountability. So as societies became more democratic, evaluation began its path to support policy decisions and accountability. So evaluation in democracy has to do with the macro positioning, we believe, of evaluation processes in society. So we recognize now several factors that are influencing the position of evaluation in democratic processes, and that's why I want to speak with you today. I want to speak for the case of Mexico at the subnational level. So in Mexico, at the subnational level, this photo is pre-pandemic, so don't worry. We acknowledge in Mexico different models where evaluation functions are located in the public sector. For instance, we have evaluation activities in planning offices. We have evaluation in finance and budget offices, in center of government agencies, or what we commonly call it, and social development offices. But in the case I want to speak with you is the experience of an autonomous body, right? An independent office apart from the usual branches of the executive, judiciary, and legislative. So we are public. We are part of the public sector. We are a public office, but we are also independent to provide sound evaluation of what works, of what doesn't work in public policy, and what is funded with public funds, right? So I want, Mexico, we are over 126 million residents, so that's quite a lot. We're a federal republic, but we have our struggles as well, particularly when it comes to social development, poverty. Almost half the population still remains in multidimensional poverty. 8.5% of population remains in extreme poverty. And for the case of Durango, my state, I am from Durango, northern Mexico, almost close to the border with the United States. We are over 1.7 million residents. We are a large state, actually. But as well, we have our struggles with almost half of the population in multidimensional poverty, right? So evaluation is a challenge here in my state. Well, culture is growing. We are particularly new. The institute is 5 years old. So we are still working on how to work on how to position evaluation processes in our society, right? So the legal and constitutional basis for evaluation, right? Article 134 of the Mexican political constitution now establishes mandatory evaluations throughout government agencies to determine merit of interventions and its results in society. This is also the case for subnational evaluation processes in Mexico, and this is what I want to focus today on my lecture, as other experiences have opted as well for a legal mandate of evaluation. I think this seems to be a standard to support independent evaluation. We acknowledge as well that this is a necessary condition, but it's not sufficient. So throughout these years, 2008, political constitution, and some, acts that supported evaluation in other matters, particularly with the use of public funds. And then in 2013, the political constitution of my state created unmandated evaluation for what is funded with public funds. Then in 2014, we have a law, so to speak, a public policy evaluation institute of the state of Durango, where it establishes how the evaluation is done throughout our public state. 2016, the Congress of State Durango appoints the General Council. Is the structure that makes the decisions, and we started working from scratch. There was nothing, so we have to start from scratch. I joined the institute in 2016, and we started working from there. With 2017, the first institutional evaluation exercise, then we start working with procedural consolidation, building alliances. Then 2019, it's a very, very interesting year because there was a transition in local governments, municipalities. So I will speak about that, what happened there. And then we started working from there to consolidate our institution. And then, 2020 posed an incredible challenge for the role of evaluation, right? The governments deemed evaluation as not the most important thing to do right in the moment, right? And possibly that dilemma remains this year. So governments have to focus on something else to provide health support as soon as possible, right? So evaluation was the least important thing, right? So we have to to adapt to that process, right? We have to adapt to how to produce, still producing evidence. We moved from usual evaluations that took several months, even years to do so, to provide fast information, to provide fast, rapid assessments, or what is known, to support decision making at the public sector, right? In this context of turmoil, pandemic, stress, etc. Right? And 2019, we are still taking new approaches and still try to build community support along evaluation and in the results of the evaluation themselves. So, who are the evaluants in our institution? So we can evaluate the executive branch, local ministries and decentralized bodies, the legislative branch. This is sort of unconventional because the Constitution tells us that we can evaluate the legislative office, but at the same time, they provide us funding. So it's kind of an unusual arrangement there. So we're still working on how that might work. The judicial branch, the judicial council, the courts, and municipalities, we have 39 local governments and obviously their agencies and other autonomous bodies. Transparency and Protection and Data Protection Institute, the Electoral Institute, the Human Rights Commission, and of course ourselves, right? So we have basically three main objectives, which is evaluate, generate evaluation culture, and generate information to support decision making at the public sector. So our work is it's focused on providing evaluation reports to enable policy stakeholders to ponder on evaluation results and improve public services at the national level. We basically focus on what is funded with public funds, to also support at the best of our ability and of course with the help of other stakeholders to support fund allocations, right? Money allocation that funds public policy. We also provide poverty-related information. Probably you may be familiar with the context of evaluation in Mexico with Coneval, the evaluation commission at the national level that provides not also evaluation, but also is in charge of measuring poverty in Mexico. So it's the official agency. So we use that information to better understand the challenges that our society is facing in order to help governments provide poverty alleviation schemes, right? Housing, water access, etc. And studies and investigations, so to speak, on conjunctural public issues, underlying elements of public debate, to deliver insights on how these challenges may be effectively addressed. At the end, we are dealing with public funds, so we are trying to move with and I think this conference is underlying this very, very much, which is to move from evidence-based policy to evidence-informed policy, right? So that's kind of the scheme here. So we're trying to address that as well with our work. So that is the idea. So the evaluation reports we are trying to do here, we do not discuss government's intentions, but their capacity to deliver effective results to society. That's very, very important to us. We try that our evaluations are independent, evidence-based, and to support evidence-informed decision making. To support by robust analysis, we have a very good team of evaluators and public analysts. And also, well, we try to provide we try that our reports are user-oriented, that we provide insights on what works and meaningful recommendations to improve the delivery of public services throughout the public sector, especially the executive and the local levels. So I'm going to provide some examples about what we have done. We have focused on social development, especially in poverty alleviation programs, social protection schemes, what it comes from with housing, social housing development initiatives, public safety, for example, crime prevention, prison system initiatives. Education is also important, educational attainment programs, teachers training, school infrastructure, agriculture is also important. Infrastructure, it has to do with economic and tourism related infrastructure because, the policy related schemes of this matter are focusing, for example, in economic and tourism, for example, and water access, effective water access, use and sanitation, for instance. So that is the idea here, but that we are developing. So in 2019 was a highlight year for the institute. Leadership in municipalities changed. So we outlined a strategic approach to provide information to transition teams. 2020 was the year that changed everything. This year and the crisis and heartbreaking stories, evaluation was the least of concern for governments. But in 2019, we were able to sit with sitting mayors and elected mayors, right? So meetings were encouraged to assess recommendations and decide which were most likely to succeed. So we discussed with them, okay, government, you are ending your term right now, mayor, you are ending your term, so you accomplished this. So very good, well done. We still have some challenges that the evaluation acknowledged. And the elected official, in this case the new mayor, is in this case listened also to our evaluations, and he committed, and they committed to the results of the evaluations in order to support his or her new policies in terms of poverty alleviation or whatever the evaluation acknowledged. So in this case, we do not enforce policy recommendations. This is not our goal. We do not enforce it. For governments, we think governments at the end will be held accountable for their own decisions by society, right? So ultimately, governments decide what to do with our suggestions. So that's the main focus of our modeling and evaluation here at the subnational level, to provide support, right? To build collaborative processes, to encourage cooperation, to encourage collaboration along these processes of evaluation. In this matter, right? So what I want to address, for example, in one example, social infrastructure in Mexico is funded by federal transfer on a year basis. So it poses a problem, a dilemma where the federal government decides how the money is to be spent, right? How the funds are to be allocated. But at the end, local governments have a margin, a small margin, and they decide how to spend it and where to spend it. So we provide with the evaluations where is working and where is not. So we are trying to provide, you provided water access infrastructure in this particular sector of the city, where actually the share of people in poverty is greater, right? So we're trying to acknowledge that, and it's also a process of that the evaluation provides also a mechanism for accountability, right, and transparency of public funds as well. For example, we also focus, for example, we made an evaluation regarding gender violence. So the evaluation provided guidance on how to increase capacity with first responders, for example, because this has to be with emergency calls regarding domestic and gender violence. So first responders are key to support these calls. So the evaluation provided guidance on how to increase capacity and encourage coordination against between agencies, among agencies, to decrease this phenomenon in the subnational level and throughout Mexico as well, right? So we have also built our cooperation as well. We have worked with academic society at the local level, but there is a problem here with academic society because particularly at the supply of evaluation, particularly with training, with evaluation training. Evaluation training in Mexico it's still weak, I think, and I think it's focused on Mexico City. And myself, I was trained in Mexico City in evaluation. So basically at the local level, we still are struggling with local capacities in evaluation, particularly with supply of training for evaluation. But we're still working with them on how to provide. At the end, they provide also investigations, so they can provide novel techniques, engaged with meaningful discussion about policy matters, etc. No? International local alliances, this is also important. We're working with Latin American networks. This is the case also as well with the European Evaluation Society, etc. The private sector, they provide information on public issues. They can be organized as well. And the society, at the end, they demand results from their authorities and public spending scrutiny. So our aim here is to be in a collaborative process with society, so we can listen to them, right? What are your concerns in public sector? What are your concerns in public policy? Why are the government not delivering what they promise? So we can also discuss with society how this process and collaborative processes are working, and with evaluation we can also give them a voice with the main topic that is discussing right now in the community, with transformational evaluation, right? To provide a community support, to listen to the beneficiaries, and not only to be a vis-a-vis evaluation only with the government and the agency of the evaluation agency, right? And the local congress, at the end, with local congresses, the local congress approves budgets, allocates funding, and legislates. So they are also an important part of the public policy process. For example, global parliamentarians with the evaluation that they can, how they can participate in evaluation. So the state congress does not only oversee our work, but demands also information. Congressmen demand information about policy matters, and we provide evaluation results to them so they can discuss what they about to support their decision making in budget allocation and legislative processes. So they can discuss how this works, and at the end they also hold governments to account. They hold governments, the state government and the local governments to account in terms of what is working and what is not working in public policy. And the evaluation is a good tool to provide that information. So what have we learned at this time after almost 6 years in the making of this of this institute? We have understood that a legal and constitutional basis for evaluation have helped tremendously to support culture evaluation. I think this seems to be a standard, as I outlined, as I underlined at the beginning. This is a necessary condition, but not sufficient. We also need that the responsiveness of government to empirically based conclusions and policies recommendations remains a challenge, particularly at the high level. We may work with policy managers. They understand well the evaluation, they understand well the results, but probably not as well at the high level, at the political level, right? At the high offices. So this remains a challenge. So we have to work with them still. So and we have to outline a strategy how to work with them. Outcome orientation and programming is yet to become a natural part of public administration procedures. So, in particular with allocation funds. So, put into context, the Mexican, as Mexico is a federal state, we are dependent. We are highly dependent on federal transfers. So these transfers are earmarked. Right, and this sometimes can be a struggle. Usually public funding allocation is inertial at most. So we still have to work on that in some topics. The anchorage of public discourse regarding accountability and transparency is growing, but policy process remains highly political. We have to acknowledge that the policy process will remain political, and that's why we want to focus on not at the beginning. We were understanding that to move from traditional public policy process to evidence-based policy. But now we are understanding that it's more like inform-based policy. So that is what we want to focus from now on. Accessibility of information and transparency is improving. That is a culture that has helped for the evaluation process and for the evaluation culture in general. And as I told you, supply of evaluation is increasing, but quality remains a challenge. So we, especially in Mexico, the topic of transformative evaluation and systems thinking is not widespread. So this is a challenge for us and in general for the evaluation community in Mexico. And dissemination of evaluation and culture evaluation is growing. So I think from this we can make a stop and ponder on these lessons and how to rearrange our priorities on where we want to focus in order to support a policy process evaluation and in terms of this to support democratic processes along the way. And of course, well, with this new, as we are working right now, we want to also focus on community support with evaluation, right? So you can still learn from us with this with our social media. I have to warn you that we are in Spanish, of course, but there are some tools that can be translated. So you want to keep in touch. My name is Sergio Chavez. I'm in charge of commissioning and coordinating evaluations in my institute. So this is where we are. 5 years in the making of the experience at the subnational level in Mexico. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much. That was very, very interesting. I'm going to just open up the floor for a moment. I've got a number of questions I'd like to raise, but Marina or Marian, or indeed Christy, have you got any thoughts or comments on what you've just heard?
Thank you very much. Is that Tom?
That's Tom. Yes, this is Tom.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much, Tom, and thank you very much, Charles, for an interesting sharing experience, especially from your side, working within a government space, but at the same time trying to influence policy and accountability. Yes, I think it can be very challenging. Coming from an experience where I worked with the Ministry of Finance in Uganda, Kampala, and they had what they were calling the Budget Monitoring and Accountability Department. And their work is to carry out evaluations like you're doing, Charles. But from the experience that I saw, most of their work remained in producing the Budget Monitoring and Accountability reports of where they went to the field. They evaluated the government projects, found gaps in infrastructure projects, whether road or electricity or water or health or education, and then came back, wrote policy briefs, and then shared, would write policy briefs and move them around the different departments. I used to work for the Economic Policy Research Department. And for me as a researcher, or the research unit, we found that information very useful in terms of informing the top management, decision making. But on the other hand, what I found very challenging also was the issue of ownership. At times it becomes, once you're an evaluation unit within a government facility, you need to keep a certain level of independence. And I'm happy that the Congress is finding your work more useful and using it than probably the mainstream government in terms of the responsiveness. So for me, my big message I would give Anand to thank you for your courage for sharing your experience after 5 years, because I worked with them for over 10 years. And for me, it became a normal thing to see a policy brief from the Budget Monitoring Evaluation Department. But on the other hand, I think I'm happy that you're using this information to channel it to the Congress. It would be interesting also to blend with the civil society side. Some of the information you can share it with the civil society to do the advocacy part, and that might be very helpful. Some information might be very difficult for you to share with government if it's very critical. So it would be interesting that you expand your learning platform, your think tank. Use think tanks to disseminate some of this information. Be courageous and share this information. Probably government can be able to respond, but it's an interesting piece of work and well done.
Thank you. Did you want to respond to that?
Yes, very much. That's yeah. I'm taking notes here. I want to address the first, well, the last idea regarding the think tanks. Um, to build this community support is not really straightforward uh, because well, civil society is sometimes is not well familiar with policy aspects or of public sector topics. Uh, and well, here in my state we don't have think tanks that can support this dissemination of information, so we need to find other ways. We try to work directly with congressmen, right, to provide them with the information. At the end, if we want to work with civil society, it will be to work with at the evaluation process in terms of how they perceive the program or the policy in terms of the beneficiaries, for instance, right? So we may work with them as a collaborative process in the evaluation. But that's about it. We have our challenges here because it's not really straightforward. Still have to work with the high political agents, right? Or with the ministers to encourage them that evaluation is useful. That evaluation will help you to allocate better funding, to drive and to steer better public policies. So in this regard, this is our thing, but we will try to acknowledge that and work on a scheme on how to work and how to empower society so they can understand evaluation. Because when you talk about when you speak with them about evaluation, they don't really understand it, because it's a natural process that when you say the word evaluation, it's natural. There is a natural resistance to it. Right? Why? Who are you? Why are you going to be who are you to evaluate me? Or what is evaluation? I mean, why are we spending money to evaluate the policy, for instance, right? So that's it. So it's not really straightforward, but that is to remain a challenge. So thank you.
Thank you. That's really interesting. It is interesting because I worked in the past for the United Kingdom National Audit Office, which has a similar relationship, obviously, with Parliament, and I still do reviews of their work for them. So I'm quite familiar with that world, and so it sounds like the three of us have all, in different ways, been involved in providing evaluations within and for government. One of the things that the UK National Audit Office does is that its reports go to a committee, the Public Accounts Committee, and they then become Public Account Committee reports. So it's a committee of Parliament that is presenting it, and they then hold the government to account for responding to the National Audit Office. So you get this, it's an interesting combination of the independent office of the National Audit Office, and yet it also works very closely with one particular committee of Parliament, and that committee then holds it to account. The other thing that resonates with what you're both saying, and particularly you, Sergio, is that a lot of effort is put into communicating and mobilizing the knowledge in civil society. So it's not just, obviously the main audience for the report is Parliament and ultimately the government, but they also put a lot of effort into communicating through the media and in other ways. Is that also your experience? Have you been able, is your institution able to get media attention and communicate in that way? And is it seen as being quite independent?
Only in some cases we have worked with media, but only in let's say pivotal topics. For instance, if the agenda is if the public agenda is discussing housing schemes because federal transfers rules changed, etc. So media pays attention. The institution has some work about it, and let's and they ask us about the reports, but that's about it. So it's isolated at the best of at best. But we still have to manage how to work with media and how to provide these knowledge, and also it's part of our responsibility to use a better language for them, because you understand that, well, policy process, we have some very jargon, right, in the policy process, specifically with federal transfers, etc. So media is not about to understand that, and not even society. So we have to provide a understandable language for them, and that's also a challenge that we have to acknowledge.
Thank you. I'm going to say hello to Johanna, who's just joined us. Johanna, I should explain that we have just one speaker here today, and we've had a presentation focused on an independent evaluation office in the state of Durango in Mexico. And we're broadly looking at the role that organisations like that, and for example the National Audit Office in the UK, play in the democratic process and building community support. So that's just to fill you in on where we are, and you're very welcome. I might bring you in a moment. So I just wanted to so there are two dimensions to your talk. Mainly, you were talking about the institutional mechanisms through which evaluation might be done, and how that contributes to the policy process or not, depending on the circumstances. At the start, you also raised the question of populism, which is not just in Mexico, but I think very widely, the rise of populism, and indeed of authoritarian populism. And by complete coincidence, a lot of my early work as an academic was on authoritarian populism and the rise of Thatcherism, as it happens. But the point about the populist approach is that these are efforts from populist leaders to appeal over the heads of organized institutions directly to the people, to mobilize support, without going through the mechanisms of accountability, and without putting yourself in any difficulty in terms of your relationship with the government system. The same would be here. I think the work that we do, we're noticing that there is pressure. The environment within which we are working as evaluators for government very often is changing, and that is linked to the rise of populism and to a reduction in the interest in evidence. And yet you also talked at the same time about the fact that there's a growth in an understanding of systems thinking. There is the work in Mexico City where they are beginning to do training around evaluation. So I think it's exactly the same as here. And I imagine for Marian as well, and in other countries, that there are conflicting trends going on, whereas evaluators, sometimes we're being excluded from the decision-making processes. At other times, there are quite positive things taking place. And I wondered how, as an independent evaluator, you see that playing out in Mexico, and in particular in the state of Durango.
Yeah, that is very important. When we started our to work on this, there was nothing, right? There was, they were asking, "Who are you?" We're starting to knock on doors. Who are you? No, I'm here to evaluate you. No, I don't have time for that. No, but it is useful, and so we have to work on how to build culture on them, and basically, as I mentioned at the beginning, I think a legal base is very, very important. I think that's that is one of the most important things that helped us in terms of how to build a evaluation culture. And after that, we started to work on one how to well to work with evaluators, to search for evaluators. I mean, who were trained. Obviously, well, there's not a lot of training, particularly in my state, about evaluation. There is some training in public policy, economics, political science, etc. But that's about it, not in evaluation. So we have to look abroad. We have to send our team to Mexico to receive training. Because well, that's about it. Basically, you have heard about the CLEAR. There's the CLEAR initiative. So in Mexico, there is a CLEAR initiative based on Mexico City. So we met with the officials there at CLEAR, and they helped us. So we provide they provide us with training about evaluation, but I think it's not enough. So we have to still working on our own capacities. So as I told you, as I mentioned before, also Coneval, also the National Institute in Evaluation, also helped us to provide support, guidance, training as well. So we are working on that. So we are building on our own capacities and understanding about the new trends, transformational evaluation, systems thinking, and so on. Particularly to provide community support. But that's been our main challenge.
Thank you. Johanna, I don't know if you wanted to introduce yourself and say a little bit about your interest in this topic. Not compulsory.
Okay, thanks a lot. I must say, I'm sorry I came late. I was kind of kept away. As it is, it's very unfortunate with this trying to attend a conference from the office. So you always
I know exactly what you mean.
Out, yes. So apologize for this. No, I'm quite interested in the topic. You may know that we had a session on community TDD, on community-driven development, and I was kind of interested in governance-related issues, of course, and that's why I kind of said, okay. I must say I don't know much about Mexico either, right? So I'm mainly listening. So as you know, as I introduced myself this morning, I'm Johanna Penetz. I'm an evaluation officer at the International Fund for Agriculture Development, and I'm doing all sorts of evaluations. So
thank you.
Very interested in governance issues and how can we promote democratic governance through our evaluations.
Great.
Thank you.
Just picking up on Joanna's point in particular, and you used the word anchor, Sergio, which I think is a useful idea. What anchors in public discourse regarding accountability and transparency, and that again in the UK and I imagine elsewhere, this challenge of anchoring good evaluative understanding of the effects of public policy in an ongoing political discourse is proving challenging for us currently. One of the particular techniques that our government pursues, not to get too political about this, is to just relentlessly introducing a new theme. So when the challenge is, but you said you would do X and you haven't done it, the announcement is just, we're going to do something else completely. So it's not the holding them to account becomes very difficult if the debate is constantly moved on. And this is actually a technique that the government, the people in the government, they've got a name for it, and the name is the dead dog technique. So that if you're having a conversation and you throw a dead dog into the middle of the room, everybody stops the conversation and they say, "What is this doing?" And of course, I don't want to exaggerate this as a challenge, but I do think that it's having a stable focused and settled discussion about the merits of different policies and a willingness to learn and adapt from those policies, there's a limit to what we as evaluators can do from below. And that I was interested, Sergio, you talked about the value of having a constitutional and legal basis for an independent evaluation office. And that does seem to me to be very, very important. And it's one of the things that anchors us in a more, as you're saying, Joanna, more democratic and an accountable system, is that you have got that anchored in the institutions. And so I was very pleased to see about your institution in Mexico, in Durango. And I was just wondering, though, how, I mean, from anybody that's listening, around how do we best as evaluators try and anchor these evaluation principles that we hold dear in a public discourse when that discourse is constantly subject to change and fluctuation? Difficult question. I don't know if you, what would be your experience, Sergio, or indeed Joanna?
Yes, to put into context, into Joanna's input about governance, I want to speak for the case of Mexico, that governance in Mexico, particularly when it comes to collaborative governance, it's still very weak. Policy process comes to communities at unilateral level. I mean, there's not really a community support to provide. I mean, sound policy process with the work of community, civil society, etc. So it's very weak. But now moving to Tom's input about anchoring, the transparency in Mexico, it's also anchored in the Constitution. So it's also, I mean, it's a strong basis to provide, public information and transparency into government issues. So it's also in the public discourse, because now society is more knowledgeable about these topics, and they can turn to governments. I want this information. Hey, what is happening with this policy? The main, for example, how is this project going? What is the what are your salaries, for instance, of high officials, for instance? So that is anchored in the public discourse, because evaluation is anchored in the law and the constitutional basis, but it's still not anchored in the public discourse. So we still need to work on that, right? As I told you, society is not very knowledgeable about these topics. I mean, evaluation, what is that? Policy process, what is that? I mean, what they care about is satisfaction. I mean, public service to hold governments into account in terms of how they deliver public services, right? I mean, did you for instance, in this pandemic, for instance, did you grow health capacity? Did you provide more hospitals? Did you provide medicines? Did you provide those schemes on time? Did you provide support for businesses that were closing, that were in danger of closing? Did you provide that? I mean, that is what the society demands at the end. No? So we have to link with that discourse in some way, that evaluation is useful for the policy decision making. But it's not really straightforward, and we have to manage about that. We have to manage that, and it's not really straightforward. So we have to think about that very, very strongly.
That's very interesting.
My addition to
please.
Hello. Yes, my addition to what Charles was saying, I think for me, I would prefer an independent evaluation body outside government, because evidence shows that, for example, in Uganda, we have the Auditor General. They usually release annual national audit reports. But usually the culprits that have misused government money, they're never held accountable. It has become a rich and increasingly causing public frustration. Then on the other hand, you also find that, for example, our government of Uganda has tried, under the office of the Prime Minister, they established what they were calling the Government Evaluation Facility, and World Bank was funding it. And consultants were brought on board, and they hired consultants, and they were bringing in all different types of reports on what was working with government programs or not working. But we never saw any action or output out of those reports beyond the reach of the consultants presenting these reports to the ministries, departments, and agencies. So for me, I think we need independent, legally established evaluation bodies that bite, that make our governments accountable, because we have a lot of the government, we have a lot of the public resources that go wasted and people are never held accountable. Not a lot of work that the Inspectorate of Government is also doing to hold the same public officers accountable that have wasted government resources. So for me, I think it's a difficult patch, but I think those reforms are needed. And another reform that was brought in our country was ensuring that communities, me, Marion, and the rest of the community, hold government accountable. They introduced another program called Barazas, where the communities sit with the local governments and they say, you've not delivered on a road, you've not delivered on a health center, you've not brought the school that you promised to build as an engineer. But after our community meeting, we have a Baraza report written, and in terms of the government performance report, they just write a number of meetings held, and that is it. So I think for me, from this meeting, from the European evaluation meetings, in terms of the future reforms, we need these bodies which are independent, that use evaluation results and make our governments account for the taxpayers' money, especially for us who are in the low developed countries. Thank you very much, Tom, and the team.
Thank you, Marion. That's really, really helpful. From what you're saying, I'm imagining a triangle, really, where you have the evaluation activities, you've got the public and you've got the government. And if the evaluation activities don't get involved with government, then you don't get the efficiency that you want. But if they become too involved with government, you don't get the accountability. And the accountability is from the public to the government, and the evaluation helps the public to hold governments to account. And I guess what you said makes me think that we need to be skilled both in engaging with political elites and explaining how we're helping them to be more efficient and effective, but also engaging with the public. And the difficulty that you mentioned, Sekio, is that the language that we use in the world of policy making, policy cycles, effectiveness, implementation, all of that language is not language that's very comfortable for the public. So maybe we need to be able to look both ways as evaluators of government, but to mobilize and inform the public, but also to engage government figures within it. So when we knock on their doors, they will say, yeah, they'll at least know who we are. At the National Audit Office, the government departments, they used to say there are two lies in the National Audit Office. One is when the National Audit Office evaluator turns up and says, we're here to help. And the second is when the civil servant says, you're very welcome. I haven't heard that for a long time, but that was what they used to say. Good. Joanna, yes, please come in.
Thank you. You were actually, Marion, hi to Uganda, because I was just about to talk about my experience in Uganda. I used to work some years ago, before I joined IFAD, in the Office of the Prime Minister in Uganda on evaluation capacity development. So that's where we have been discussing and talking about all these different mechanisms also to feedback evaluation findings. And of course, there is always a missing kind of missing angle in the triangle is Parliament, right? So we try to engage with Parliament as well in Uganda, and I think this is still, I don't know if the discussion is still ongoing about the evaluation independent. You know, if you talk about independent evaluation architecture, so I mean, money has to come from somewhere, right? You don't earn money with evaluation. You need to be funded by somewhere. So the question is to whose, what is it? You know, whose money I get whose tune, I think. Of course, if it is Parliament is one thing. In the UK, or for example, the ICAI is reporting to Parliament. In Germany, it's my home country, we have set up an independent evaluation office, which is still funded from a ministry, where there were issues of independence then, although it's structurally independent, but of course the money comes from that ministry, and appointments have been signed off by the ministry in the past, right? So I think on the other side, I think Finland, I remember, they have quite an independent evaluation outfit or something, you know how they do it. But then, okay, if you're independent, so where would you get your money from? So who's financing you, and who's actually the user of your evaluation, right? And that's what Tom says. I mean, how you feed back findings then to the public. I mean, could be through, you know, if you have an accountable structure there, through that structure. Otherwise, go through the media, which is also something which we're not familiar with working. So for me, it's not just about the principles. It's also about the institutional structure and how, you know, where the money comes from and who the main user is of my evaluations. Over from me. Thanks a lot.
No, that's really helpful. I think you're right. I think there's partly what Sergio called the kind of public discourse around accountability. There's also what he was highlighting around the institutional mechanisms, but there is something else about genuine and real independence which is respected and honoured by the different parties involved, and that's something that is more intangible, perhaps. So the UK National Audit Office, it's quite a complicated relationship both with the Public Accounts Committee and with because it's the Comptroller and Auditor General, the boss of the office. It's his private office technically, but he's appointed by government. So it's quite an interesting set of complicated interrelationships. And at its best, that just means that everybody is included in the process and supports it. But at worst, it becomes a form of political corruption, I think. Very interesting. I'm just aware that we haven't, Marina, you've been listening with care, I think. Did you want to comment on what you've been hearing? May not be willing to do it. Okay, that's fine. No, it's not an obligation. That's great. I don't know if you, Sergio, on the basis of this conversation, you'd like to kind of do some summing up or move towards some final thoughts. I think, from my point of view, I think it's important to keep this idea about the political discourse, the issues of populism, and indeed authoritarian populism, but also to recognise the value and importance of how institutions function to maintain an independent position. But I really like, what you were saying, Joanna, at the end there, which is that it's not just the institutional arrangements; it's how, in reality, they work and operate. With that kind of in mind, Sergio, I don't know if you wanted just to arrive at some concluding points, but it'd be nice to keep this conversation going.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Yes, I strongly believe that the institutional arrangement it's important, but it is also more important in how it actually works, right? For instance, our council is elected by the Congress, a competitive process where citizens or academics enroll into Congress to participate in the process, and eventually the committee in the Congress joins and analyzes this the curriculum and etc., and then provides insight to the all congressmen to provide who might be the best suitable person to be in this institute, right? So that is that is also well, in paper that's good. In paper it's also good to protect the process of independent evaluation, so it's not political, but also you cannot disregard the fact that at the end politicals are electing who is in charge of evaluation, so it's kind of a gray area, for instance. So it's not very clear. In the paper it's okay, but in the real process there are some risks, and we have to acknowledge that. But in the end, well, that's how it works. That's how the arrangement works. And of course, well, we are funded by public funds. Congress allocates money for us. We use public funds. We provide evaluation. We use that money to provide evaluation. And there is some discourse about, for instance, in public officials. Okay, if I give you money and you are trying to evaluate me, I get to decide what goes into the evaluation. And we say, yes, you are right, but no. I mean, this is about accountability. This is about transparency. This is about telling you what is working and what is not working and how to improve it. It's at best, it's the opportunity to have the information on how to deliver better public services. And that's how they change the discourse. Okay. Let's give it a try, and they engage with evaluation processes, right? So it's not really straightforward. It's really political. We have to acknowledge that evaluation is very technical and normative, provides normative insights, but it also has a political a political element to it, and we have to acknowledge that. So in the end, the public, we have to work on the public discourse on how to embed this discourse, how to embed this whole idea that evaluation is important not only to provide accountability and transparency of public funds, but also to provide insights on how to improve public services, to provide better goods to society. You know, at the end, it's right now, for example, we are evaluating in some aspects policy response to the pandemic. At the end, society, at least in my state and at least in general in Mexico, they want to know, okay, why did we have so many deaths in Mexico? What happened? I mean, hospitals collapsed, and this was the case for Mexico. So the evaluation is, well, what worked, what didn't work, and at the end it's about accountability, right? So did you increase hospital capacity enough to in terms of increased demand about the pandemic? Did you provide business support to businesses that were almost closing because of the lockdown? For instance, those are the questions that society is making. So we want to address that with evaluation, and we're trying to translate that into the public discourse of how evaluation can help to answer those questions. I'm sorry, Tom, your microphone.
Thank you. I noticed we've just been joined by Khalil Bitar. Just to explain, we only had one speaker for this, but we've had a great conversation for the past hour. But I didn't. You might just want to introduce yourself, say hello, and explain your interest in this topic, if you like. You don't have to, but it'd be nice to hear from you.
Thank you, Tom. Sorry, I joined a little bit later because I had session before, and
it's quite understandable. It happens all the time.
But the topic is very interesting for me because I'm generally interested in, democratic evaluation and how we use evaluation, not only from, like Sergio said, not only for accountability but for learning and communicating with the public. So thank you for that.
And is it Khalil or Halil? How do I pronounce your name?
Well, if you want, Khalil.
Halil.
Khalil, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So where are you speaking from, and where do you work?
I am from Palestine, but currently I am in Germany completing my PhD. And it's a public policy PhD,
I
but
see. Okay.
on evaluation and how actually evaluation is used in conflict-affected and fragile settings. So,
Oh, wow. That's so interesting. Because quite often evaluation in those settings is put on the back burner, isn't it? And that's partly why some very poor practices have developed in conflict situations, including from, well, I used to work for a while with Save the Children, but so organizations like Save and others, have not always behaved perfectly. And whilst our programs are generally well evaluated, our development programs are well, our crisis response programs often haven't been. And I think what your work is a really interesting area to be focusing on, actually. So that would be useful. What we've been saying in this group is around how evaluation becomes institutionalized in the organizations of in this case, the crisis response, but also how it becomes anchored in the public discourse as well. And it'd be very interesting just to hear from you, even if only briefly, about how the challenges for both of those things in your area of interest. So how do you anchor an interest in evaluation in crisis responses and conflict situations? And how do you root that in the organizations and institutionalize that as well? What are your thoughts?
Thank you. So I will contribute with that, maybe, and also have a question about that for you and for Sergi. So in conflict setting, at least what the research is showing that I have been doing, that unfortunately a lot of the public policy evaluation and focus on the education sector in Palestine, education policy, it's really donor driven. And I see, and I guess you already mentioned this point, evaluation is very political. It's technical work, but it has a lot of politics behind it. So when you have a government that is not really elected, there's no democratic process going on, especially in context where there's no democracy, there's conflict, and there's not so much public accountability, then it becomes so much harder. And whatever evaluation is done is when donors ask for it, more than when it's coming from the demand side. There's supply because they're evaluators, but also because they're paid as consultant with international aid money. And I don't, there are some progress for sure, and there are, good, steps ahead, but still the public demand, what Sergio was talking about, people ask and people question the government. Unfortunately, even with years and years of investment in this, is not really so much. You cannot see it on the ground. And I question the sustainability of it. Whenever you don't have the funding, will the government, any minister will have to have evaluations, because he can say, okay, I learned this, I know this, and sometimes we know the difference. I'm sure you also said this perhaps, or you will, about that, with at least not evidence-based, but evidence-informed policy, that would be good enough. But unfortunately, in many cases, it's not happening. My question, my things that I like to know, perhaps you talk, Sergi, about one part about this democratic, like the product of the evaluation. But my question is, in the case of Mexico, like you said, and also Tom, from your wide experience, and I'm aware of your work and followed before. So is also the processes of doing the evaluation, like for example, you have Ernest House, before him, I think it was, I forgot the name now, but the whole democratic deliberative evaluation involving stakeholders. Are you also looking at this aspect? Not only that, okay, we have evaluation results and we share it, but also, is this a process also of the evaluation is democratic? Is it involving all stakeholders? Or we're mainly listening to the stakeholders. Thank you.
Great question. Do you want? I've got some thoughts on that, but Sergio, did you want to say something?
Yes, that's right. No, very important question, Khalil. Nice meeting you. It's it's a very important issue for us. We're still beginning to work on a democratic evaluation process. Evaluation in Mexico, and as we were trained, evaluation was about telling what is working with the program, with the public program, with the policy process, how to improve it, etc., and only communicating it to the policy managers, right? And at best at the high political level, right? And ministers, congressmen, etc., right? But we are beginning to work with community in terms of participatory evaluation. We are beginning, so we need to learn from that. Once the results are once we finish the evaluation, we can learn from what we learned from the beneficiaries, what they have to say about the evaluation process, what they have to say about the policy process itself. So we are beginning on working on that, because training in evaluation in Mexico, it's radically weak, particularly in my state. There's no basic evaluation training. At best, we have policy, political science, economics, etc., but that's not about it. At best, Mexico is beginning to understand, particularly in Mexico City, and some universities are beginning to understand that for these trends, transformative evaluation, systems thinking, collaborative and participatory evaluation, collaborative governance, they're beginning to understand that. So we are behind them, pushing them. Okay, we need to address these issues. So we are beginning. So thank you, Khalil.
Interesting. Yeah, I was going to say, it's funny you should say that. That years ago, because I worked for a little while with the National Audit Office as their senior research fellow, but that's going back 20 years. But during that time, I've had conversations with the UK National Audit Office, and one was exactly the point that you raised, which is I was saying that we need to think about the role of the Independent Evaluation Office that is moving from producing major reports that just go to Parliament and become part of a deliberative process. Is exactly the word. So that it becomes part of a more conversational approach and part of a more deliberative approach, in which as with deliberative democracy, the conversations have certain rules attached to them about the orientation to the public interest and the role of evaluation. So you can't just say anything you want in the conversation if you've got no evidence for it, and nor can you say I want it because I like that kind of stuff and I don't care about anybody else. The conversation has to be, I think this would be good for us, we the public, for these reasons, and this is my evidence. So building on that idea of deliberative democracy, you then say the evaluators, we shouldn't be the only voice in this debate, for goodness sake, but we have got a really important role in helping to shape and inform and contribute to that debate. And that would be, I think, quite an exciting road to go down. But having had those discussions now quite a few years ago, they didn't really get anywhere, because the institutional responsibility of the Audit Office is, at the end of the day, to produce reports that go to Parliament. And they haven't got the resource and the money to do all this other stuff. So whilst they thought, yeah, that's really interesting, we'd love to do that, in reality, that they've not really been able to go down that road. And so they've now gone down, they really are still in the mindset of their role is to produce really relevant, really timely, well-produced reports that go to Parliament, and then they inform the media about that, which is great. It's a really important role, and I wouldn't decry it at all. But it isn't doing what you were saying, which is how do we take these in and become part of a national conversation.
Thank you very much. This is really helpful.
And I'll be interested. Are you going to write any? Are you? Did you say you're doing a PhD or is it a master's?
Yeah.
And what is this? What is the subject of that?
So the subject is focused on really on how, at some point, the government, with again this national planning that is based on donor support, did a monitoring and evaluation system, and I'm looking at how this monitoring and evaluation system is really used to inform policy, or is it donor requirement? And actually, it is used. So how it is used? What are the processes? Did it have really an influence? Because it can tell us a lot about if those, World Bank has been supporting a lot of, national monitoring and evaluation system, as you know, in many countries. Yeah. It's happening a lot in actually Latin America as well, mainly supporting M&E systems. So how this national M&E system and the evaluation policy is influencing decision making, and because it's so wide and everything, took the education policy. I have not, I'm writing a thesis, so it's not journal articles and working on other things as well, but this is where it's
really
going.
Interesting. Oh, good luck with that. That does sound fantastic. We've just been joined by Muyiwa, if I pronounced you rightly. I was explaining earlier, we just had one presentation, but we've had a fantastic conversation on the basis of that. I don't know if you just wanted to say hello and explain your interest in this topic. It's not compulsory.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, this is Muyiwa. Yeah, I just joined the conversation, and my interest is actually to see how we can look at democratic process from the onset of the inception phase of an evaluation, and how that can translate from that process to the community at the grassroots. And I'm just trying to come and see, to hear more about what can be done in that regard. Not that I have anything to contribute really, just to join the conversation and see how much I can learn. That's my why I came into this discussion. Thank you very much.
I mean, I'll just very quickly summarize what I think are the main points in relation to that, and then maybe others can chip in. But what we've been talking about is how the independent evaluation role can be institutionalized within the Constitution, within the formal organizational settings, but that is not enough. It might be necessary, it's not sufficient, is what Sergio has been saying. It also needs to be anchored in the public discourse. And we talked about how difficult it can be for evaluators who use the language of policymakers to also engage with that policy discourse, public discourse, and to engage with things that matter to the public as well. But I think we also talked about how there can be a danger that the institutions look as if they're quite independent and supportive, but actually can also, in reality, might not be delivering what formally they should be doing. It's often said that formally and constitutionally, the Constitution of the Soviet Union was the most democratic in the world. I'm not sure we would actually want to say that in reality it was. But I think there's something, so those have been the things that we've been particularly talking about, and how therefore evaluators look in two directions. One is towards government for improving efficiency and effectiveness, and one's towards the public to strengthen accountability. And it's a kind of triangle that we were talking about. But Sergio, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but that seems to be how the conversation's been going.
Yeah, that's right. We focused on how to or lessons in Mexico, how we institutionalized evaluation, and how that mirrors other contexts. We acknowledge that in this case, the legal and constitutional basis for evaluation is very, very important. But I stressed that it is a necessary condition, but it's not enough. It's not sufficient, because we need to embed the whole evaluation process into the public discourse, right? To answer the questions that matter. Okay, we can answer the questions of public policy, of what policy managers want, but also we need to embed this discourse into the public, into civil society. In Mexico, the discourse is moving towards into a discourse of transparency and accountability, but the evaluation discourse is not embedded enough in the public discourse, at least in civil society. And we need to work on that because we have to work on the language. We have to work on more democratic evaluation processes. We need to work on other schemes to professionalize this work, because we have now understood that evaluation is not a profession, but we have to look at it as a professional work, right? And in terms of that democratic evaluation, we can use insights from other stakeholders. I attended another lecture, and they provided the concept of epistemic fluency, right? To be able to use knowledge of other stakeholders, engineers to work with infrastructure, health experts to work with health issues, etc. Right, and that's how we can move forward to provide more sound evaluations in terms of more democratic processes. I think that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. I might steal that expression, epistemic fluidity. That's very interesting. Sorry, I cut you off there, Muyiwa. Go on.
Maybe also to add, is that okay, Tom?
Yeah, please.
Yes, I just wanted to add on your triangle, the actors called private sector. In Uganda, our local governments in the past decade also have attracted a lot of private service providers in terms of the expertise, in terms of providing services to the community on behalf of government. And one of my worst nightmares that I've found as a researcher, but also as an evaluator, it has been the poor maintenance of government facilities. Once the private actors have done the implementation, they get their money. Since they're profit-oriented, they deliver and then go out. But then the issue of community ownership has been very weak. And so I think in future it's also interesting to have some standards and regulations, but also parameters of how far we can engage the private actors in terms of the PPPs, the public-private partnership, in terms of our evaluation, what they can do and where they can stop. Thank you.
Really great point. I think that's so important. And most of whatever we think about the private sector, most of our development goals cannot be achieved without their active involvement. And so how they become an accountable and included and successful part of that process, I think, is a really, really interesting question. I'm going to wind this up, I think. What is great about this conference is that, you never know where conversations are going to go. And they almost always go somewhere really interesting. And this has been no exception. I'm sorry that as it happens, I'm not sorry that there was only one speaker, but I'm sure the other two have missed that. And so thank you, Sergio, for your forbearance and for persisting in this. We've had some really great contributions and really, really interesting thoughts. It's been really helpful for me in developing how I think about some of these issues, and in some ways reminding me about old debates around authoritarian populism that I want to revisit actually now you've been talking about that. And thank you, Marina and Marian and Christy for being our volunteer supporting. I hope you found it interesting. And so now I'm going to get myself ready for Michael Quinn Patton, I think, from my point of view. And I think I probably ought to write a few words for my farewell end of conference 4 or 5 minutes talk, so I will go off and do that. Thanks ever so much. Do keep in touch. I'm on LinkedIn. You've got my contact details, or through the EES as well, because as you know, I'm vice president at the moment. So there are various ways of keeping in touch. Khalil, it's lovely to meet with you.
Thank you so much.
Good luck. Which institution are you doing your research in?
At the Willy Brandt School of Public Policy here in
Great.
Yeah.
Very good. That'll be really interesting. So good luck with all of that. Thanks,
Thanks.
Marion and Marina, and especially to Sergio. So
Thanks a
thank
lot. Nice meeting you all.
you. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Tom. Mm. Thank you, Charles. Well done.
Bye. Nice meeting you.
Okay, nice meeting you.